Gunfire ripped the valley. 360 Marines were seconds from extinction. Their commander quit, writing casualty reports before the fight was done. But one sniper refused, Kelly Kane. She grabbed her rifle, defied every order, and climbed straight into hell. Her shots crushed machine guns, stopped rockets mid-air, turned certain death into survival. But the enemy wasn't just anyone, he was her former mentor, a ghost who knew every move she'd make. This is the untold story of the sniper who said, "I'll take the fall for this," and saved 360 Marines. This is VeteranBiker. Comment 1 if you're new, 2 if you've been with us, 3 if you ride with us every week. Like, subscribe, and stay to the end. Incoming! The cry cracked across the comms, sharp and panicked, a heartbeat before the earth ripped open. The blast erupted beneath the lead Humvee with apocalyptic force, a geyser of dirt and fire spewing skyward. The armored truck lifted clear off the ground, twisted in mid-air, then came crashing back down in a crumpled heap of steel and shattered glass. Flames licked its frame, black smoke billowing into the sky like a signal flare for death itself. The concussion slammed into the valley walls, the sound ricocheting back and forth until the gorge itself seemed to howl. Dust avalanched from the ridges overhead. Then came the storm. Gunfire tore down from the cliffs in relentless sheets. Machine guns barked from concealed nests, their muzzle flashes strobing against the jagged rock. Tracer rounds seared across the valley floor in red arcs, each line a promise of sudden death. Rockets shrieked downward, trailing smoke before detonating against vehicles in bursts that rattled bones. The convoy dissolved into chaos. Marines leapt from transports, boots hitting the dirt as they scrambled for cover that didn't exist. Their formation fractured instantly, broken into desperate clusters of men huddled behind burning wreckage or shallow depressions. Voices crashed over the radio network, overlapping in a tangled chorus of fear and urgency. "We're pinned down. Grid 794. Medic, medic. Casualty at the lead vehicle. They're on both ridges. We surrounded." A young corporal tried to drag a wounded friend into a ditch. Bullets struck the ground in angry spurts around them before one tore through his helmet, snapping his head back like a rag doll. Blood darkened the dirt beneath him, steam rising as it mixed with the heat of burning diesel. Inside the valley, time slowed into fragments of survival. Marines returned fire, but their rifles cracked uselessly against enemies hidden high above, firing from near-invisible dugouts with commanding lines of sight. The canyon funneled sound and fury until every shot was deafening, every explosion magnified 100-fold. At Firebase Rockford, 30 miles away, the ambush played out in merciless clarity across a wall of monitors. Drone feeds tracked each burning vehicle, each heat signature sprawling into stillness. Tactical maps bled red with markers of casualties. Colonel Matthew Harrison stood stiff-backed at the command console, his weathered face lit by the sterile glow of screens. 52 years old, he had seen enough combat to bury his humanity behind routine. His eyes moved with the mechanical precision of a man tallying losses, not pleading for lives. 360 personnel confirmed in the valley, reported Major Ellis, his voice even despite the devastation on the screens. "Air support?" Harrison asked. "Negative, sir. 2 F-15 seconds nearby, but the proximity restriction is in effect." "Then it's already over," Harrison said, jaw tight. "Begin drafting casualty reports. Fill in names as they're confirmed." Silence pressed down on the command room. Dozens of officers sat frozen before their stations, watching Marines scatter like broken chess pieces across the gorge. On screen, tracer fire raked over men dragging the injured behind flaming transports. A medic crawled across open ground, only to be cut down mid-sprint. Each second carried new loss, each frame another reason to stop watching. From the shadows at the rear of the room, a figure stepped forward. Sergeant Kelly Kane was not tall, not loud, not the kind of Marine who filled a space with brute presence. But as she walked toward the monitors, rifle slung across her back, her composure carried weight sharper than volume. Her dark eyes never left the images of Marines clawing for life in that valley. "I can end this," she said. Her voice was quiet but absolute. Every head turned. Some officers gaped in disbelief, others smirked with contempt. To them, she was support staff, a woman buried in analysis roles, not someone to shape the battlefield. Colonel Harrison didn't even glance at her. "Return to your station, Sergeant. This is not a shooting gallery." Kelly stood her ground, fingers tightening against the sling of her M485 sniper rifle. "With respect, sir, I have a solution." "That's an order, Sergeant Kane." On the main screen, a lieutenant crawled through dirt toward a fallen comrade, tracer fire raking the ground inches from his helmet. The wounded man bled out beneath him, body twitching weakly as his lifeblood pooled into the soil. Kelly's jaw clenched. She looked from the screens to Harrison's back, then turned silently, retreating into shadow with her rifle. The room resumed its grim calculations. Officers tapped at keyboards, radios hissed with fragmented cries, and Harrison's voice remained steady as he prepared to sign 360 letters of condolence. But outside the command center, Kelly Kane's path shifted. She moved with purpose through the dim corridors of the firebase, steps quick but deliberate, eyes locked forward. Every instinct in her body screamed to obey orders, to accept the chain of command. Every lesson drilled into her since boot camp said to sit down, keep quiet, let men of rank decide. Yet the images of Marines sprawled across the gorge burned hotter than duty. She pushed open the armory door. The air smelled of gun oil and cold steel. Rows of rifles lined the racks, pistols resting in drawers, ammunition cases stacked like bricks. Kelly found hers immediately. The M485 she had cleaned and reassembled that very morning, a weapon she knew better than her own pulse. As she slid the bolt back, checking the chamber, a voice cut from behind. "You're about to throw away your career." Kelly turned. Master Sergeant Luther Cole leaned against the frame, arms folded over his broad chest. Age had carved lines into his face, scars tracing old battles, but his eyes still carried the fierce clarity of a soldier who refused to look away. "If I do nothing, they all die," Kelly replied. "You disobey Harrison, you'll face a court-martial." "Only if I survive," she said flatly. Cole stepped closer, his limp pronounced from an old wound, but his voice steady. He pressed something into her palm, a tarnished coin bearing the Marine sniper insignia. "Your father gave me this years ago, said it brought him luck. Maybe it'll do the same for you." Kelly closed her fist around the coin, feeling its weight. Not luck, she thought, responsibility. Cole met her gaze one last time. "The ridge to the north gives you line of sight on both flanks. Winds will cut hard after midday. Account for the drift. And Kane, don't miss." Without another word, Kelly slung the rifle across her shoulder, grabbed 2 magazines of match-grade rounds, and slipped past him. The base's outer gates loomed ahead, guarded by 2 young Marines gripping carbines. Cole shuffled toward them, launching into a gruff lecture about defective equipment. Their attention fixed on him, Kelly slid into the terrain beyond, disappearing into the scrub. Behind her, the firebase returned to its rituals of bureaucracy. Ahead, the valley roared with the chaos of dying men. Kelly Kane moved quickly across the rugged landscape, the sniper's coin warm in her hand, her rifle heavy across her back. Each step carried her closer to Hell's Ridge, the one position where she could rewrite the fate Harrison had already signed away. She no longer heard the voices of doubt behind her. She heard only the cries over the radio, the thunder of machine guns, the rising fire consuming her fellow Marines. Kelly inhaled deeply, steadying her pulse, and pressed forward into the stone wilderness. The slope rose before her like a jagged wall, loose shale sliding beneath each bootstep. Kelly dug her fingers into the rock, pulling herself higher inch by inch. Heat shimmered off the stone, baking her shoulders as the sun crept overhead. From below, the sound of battle rolled up the canyon like the ocean, crashing bursts of machine gun fire, the hollow pop of grenades, the screams of men buried in dust. Every sound reminded her that time was bleeding away with every heartbeat. Her body protested the climb, lungs burning, thighs knotting with strain. She ignored it all, her mind locked on the geometry of the valley. She pictured it as a board scattered with pieces, pinned squads, ambush positions, choke points. The advantage belonged to the enemy, but the board was not fixed. One sniper in the right place could redraw the entire equation. The ridge came into view, a harsh spine of stone jutting out over the gorge. Kelly crawled the last stretch on hands and knees, gravel cutting into her palms. She slid into a natural depression in the rock, finally hidden from the naked sky. From here the world opened. Below, the convoy was a graveyard. Vehicles burned, smoke curling upward in oily ribbons. Men crouched behind whatever wreckage remained, firing upward in short bursts that vanished against the cliffs. Through her scope, Kelly spotted the enemy positions, sandbagged nests tucked into caves, dark figures moving along goat paths, rocket teams setting up on flat ledges. She could almost hear the confidence in their movements, professional, measured, utterly sure of victory. She adjusted the bipod, locked the rifle into position, and opened her notebook. Numbers and diagrams filled its pages, a map of angles and corrections written in her tight, precise hand. Wind speed steady from the west. Elevation 700 meters above the valley floor. Range to first target 900. Kelly steadied her breathing. 4 seconds in. Hold. 4 seconds out. The world narrowed to the reticle dancing in front of her eye. Crosshairs settled on a machine gunner braced behind sandbags, the muzzle of his weapon vomiting fire into the valley. His rounds trapped an entire squad pinned behind a wrecked transport, every attempt at movement shredded before it began. Kelly exhaled slowly, her heartbeat slowed to a steady rhythm. She pressed the trigger with smooth, even pressure. The rifle barked. Through the scope, she saw the gunner's chest explode in a red spray. He toppled backward, weapon clattering from his hands. The squad below seized the moment, dragging their wounded deeper into cover. Kelly worked the bolt fluidly, chambering another round. Her next shot found an assistant gunner rushing to man the abandoned weapon. The round struck his throat, spinning him sideways in a grotesque dance before he collapsed over the sandbags. Already, the rhythm of battle shifted. The enemy fighters shouted in confusion, some ducking into cover, others hesitating. Kelly allowed no pause. She swiveled left, scope finding a team of 2 preparing a rocket. One crouched with the launcher balanced on his shoulder, the other fumbling with the round. Kelly calculated distance, 760 meters, factored in the crosswind, then squeezed. The rocketeer dropped before he ever fired. His partner froze in shock, the warhead clutched awkwardly in his hands. Kelly's next round struck him clean through the face, snapping his head back with brutal finality. The rocket tumbled to the dirt, harmless. The Marines below cheered, their voices faint but rising above the chaos. For the first time since the ambush began, hope flickered across the valley. Back at Firebase Rockford, officers stared at their monitors in disbelief. Enemy positions, once unbreakable, were suddenly collapsing one by one. Major Ellis leaned toward his screen, adjusting the feed as if clarity could explain the impossible. "Who the hell is taking those shots?" someone muttered. Colonel Harrison's jaw tightened. He didn't need to ask. Kelly ignored the chatter over the comms. She shifted her position slightly, muscles coiling as she adjusted for the next shot. Her scope drifted across the battlefield until it froze on a familiar silhouette. High on the opposite ridge stood a man directing fighters with crisp hand signals. Unlike the black-clad insurgents around him, he wore desert camouflage, his stance calm, commanding. Kelly knew that posture, that economy of movement. Sergei Malenkov. The recognition slammed into her gut. He had been her instructor during joint training years ago, the one who drilled into her the mathematics of distance kills, the patience of a true marksman. He had once placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "The best shot is the one they never see coming." Now, here he was, orchestrating the massacre of her comrades. Kelly adjusted her scope, centering it on his chest. Range, 1,200 meters. A brutal shot under current conditions. She recalculated, factoring the shifting wind and the heat haze rising from sun-scorched rock. Her finger rested against the trigger. She remembered her father's words, "The shot you don't take haunts you longer than the ones you do." Kelly exhaled. The world hushed. She squeezed. The rifle kicked into her shoulder. Through the scope she saw Malenkov jerk, blood blossoming from his chest before he staggered and fell behind the rocks. His hand signals ended forever. The ripple was immediate. Fighters around him faltered, some dropping to cover, others shouting in sudden panic. The ambush lost its conductor and the chaos began to unravel. But Kelly knew better than to celebrate. For every enemy she dropped, others remained, and the high ground was never safe for long. A flicker of light caught her eye, a glint of glass on a distant ridge. Instinct screamed at her. She rolled sideways an instant before a round shattered the stone where her head had been. Shards of rock sliced her cheek. Counter-snipers. Kelly flattened against the ridge, heart pounding. Through her scope she caught a shadow moving across the far ledge. Not one, but two. They were working as a pair, leapfrogging positions to pin her down. The hunter had become the hunted. She pressed her body into the earth, steadying her breath. Every muscle tightened with the knowledge that one mistake meant death. The enemy rifles cracked again, rounds whining overhead. Dust sprayed against her face. Kelly didn't panic. She remembered Malenkov's lessons. Ironically, the very doctrine now turned against her. Counter-snipers looked for patterns. Stay still and you die. Move without calculation and you die faster. She reached slowly into her pack, pulling free her helmet. Sliding it onto the end of her cleaning rod, she raised it just above the ridge line. A shot tore through it instantly, punching a neat hole straight through. The flash gave away their nest. Kelly pivoted, swung her rifle, and fired in the same breath. One figure toppled backward, a smear of crimson across the stone. The second marksman fired back, forcing her down again. He shifted position, searching for the angle to finish her. Kelly crawled 3 meters to her right, belly scraping rock, then propped the rifle against a new outcrop. She waited, patience, stillness. The enemy sniper edged into view, silhouette outlined against the sky. Kelly squeezed. The round struck clean through his chest, snapping him backward in a spray of dust and blood. Silence reclaimed the ridge. Kelly lay still, chest heaving, sweat dripping into her eyes. For now, she had survived the duel. But survival was temporary. More enemies would come. Down in the valley, Marines regrouped, rallying behind the cover her shots provided. They pulled their wounded into safer positions, returned fire with renewed energy. Over the comms, desperate voices grew steadier, bolstered by the unseen guardian above them. Kelly shifted, scanning the battlefield once more. Her rifle was hot, her cheek raw from the stock, but she ignored the discomfort. She wasn't done, not while any of them was still trapped. On the screens back at the firebase, disbelief turned to recognition. Commander Warren of the attached SEAL team leaned forward, eyes narrowing at the precision pattern emerging. He had seen these shots before, years ago in another war. He whispered a name under his breath, one half forgotten, half myth, Phantom 7. Colonel Harrison stiffened, fury tightening his face. He knew exactly who was on that ridge, and he knew she had just made herself both a savior and a traitor. Kelly Kane didn't hear them. She had no attention left for politics or protocol. The valley demanded all of her, and she had given herself to it completely. The ridge baked under a ruthless sun, stone radiating heat that shimmered in the air like a veil. Kelly Kane pressed her cheek back to the rifle stock, sweat trickling into her eye. She ignored it, adjusting the focus until the battlefield below sharpened again into brutal clarity. The valley had become a slaughterhouse frozen in motion. Smoke trailed from gutted vehicles, curling upward in lazy spirals. Marines crouched behind twisted frames, weapons spitting short bursts whenever a target exposed itself. Their movements were no longer frantic. They were deliberate now, steadied by the unseen hand reshaping the fight from above. Kelly marked her next targets with calm precision. A cluster of fighters on the western slope moved to emplace a heavy weapon. One crouched to anchor the tripod, another balanced the barrel. She calculated the line of fire. If the weapon locked in, it would rake straight across a squad of Marines clustered in a shallow ditch. Her scope centered on the loader's temple. She breathed out, squeezed. The round cracked and the man collapsed sideways, clutching nothing but dirt. The barrel rolled from his arms. His partner froze in horror, just long enough for Kelly's second shot to strike him square in the sternum. The tripod lay abandoned. Marines below surged forward, dragging two injured comrades back under the lull in fire. Their sergeant shouted orders, reorganizing with the confidence of men who believed they might survive. Kelly shifted right, spotting another enemy team moving across a goat path. She fired once, twice, each round dropping a figure before they even realized they were exposed. Through the lens she saw confusion ripple across the insurgents. Fighters glanced upward, searching desperately for the phantom hand culling them. From her hide, Kelly moved like a shadow. She never lingered after firing, shifting her body a few feet, realigning the rifle, vanishing before counterfire could fix her. Her father's words echoed in her thoughts, reshaped now by necessity. Precision is not just accuracy, precision is survival. Yet the strain grew heavier with each shot. Her muscles ached from holding tension, her vision blurred from staring through glass. The rifle barrel radiated heat, faint mirages rising from its length. She wiped sweat from her brow with the back of her glove, then steadied again. Far below, a lieutenant rallied a battered platoon, directing them toward a cluster of rocks that offered better defense. Kelly tracked him through her scope. The young officer's arm hung uselessly at his side, crimson staining his sleeve, yet he moved with steady purpose. His men followed, encouraged by his grit. She recognized him from the mess hall, Jason Miller, green in command, but brave enough to stare down hell without flinching. Kelly turned her scope back to the ridge opposite. There, another glint, another scope. Her pulse spiked. She'd already outmatched two counter-snipers, but experience told her more would come. Whoever commanded this ambush had studied the art of layered traps. A single flash could mean death. She ducked instinctively as a round cracked against stone, scattering grit across her cheek. She rolled into a new hollow, heart hammering, ears ringing. This time she didn't retaliate immediately. She waited, every sense extended, minutes stretched, filled only by the distant roar of battle. Then movement. Subtle, deliberate. A figure shifting to gain a better line of sight. Kelly's reticle found him. She didn't hesitate. One breath, one squeeze, one enemy less. But before relief could settle, another thunderclap shook the ridge. An RPG screamed from the opposite wall, striking dangerously close to the marine cluster below. The explosion hurled men into the air, dirt raining over their positions. Kelly's throat tightened. Every delay cost lives. She swung her rifle, tracing the smoke trail back to its source. Two fighters reloaded on a ledge above the gorge. They moved quickly, practiced. Kelly fired. One collapsed instantly, but the second crouched behind stone, launcher already in hand. He rose, aiming downward at the pinned platoon. Kelly had seconds. She shifted, recalculated wind, and pressed. The shot split the air. The insurgent jerked, launcher falling from his grip. It tumbled end over end before detonating against the cliff in a hollow boom. A ripple of cheers carried faintly from the Marines below. Kelly didn't allow herself to react. She shifted again, eyes raking the ridges for the next threat. Back at Firebase Rockford, tension boiled. Officers leaned over consoles, whispering disbelief. Colonel Harrison's face remained a stone mask, but fury simmered beneath. He knew exactly who had defied his order, who now held the ridge as if ordained for it. His knuckles whitened on the edge of the console. Commander Warren, standing at the back, folded his arms. His gaze never left the drone feed, which captured fragments of Kelly's work, the sudden collapse of enemy strongholds, the frantic repositioning of fighters once so confident. He didn't speak her name aloud. He didn't need to. Recognition burned in his eyes. Meanwhile, Kelly adjusted her position once more. The battle below shifted slowly, like a tide turning after long resistance. Marines regrouped, dragging wounded into improvised casualty points, returning fire with discipline instead of panic. Their survival still balanced on a knife's edge, but for the first time, the blade tilted their way. Kelly's cheek pressed once more against the stock, the reticle hovering over a new target. Her breathing slowed, her heartbeat steadied. She knew she could not hold this ridge forever, but for every second she did, another Marine lived. A sound reached her ears, faint but distinct. The chop of helicopter blades, far off yet unmistakable. Reinforcements, extraction, she didn't know. All she knew was this: she had to keep the valley alive until they arrived. She blinked sweat from her eyes, whispered under her breath, "Not today," and settled into her scope once more. The first sound was faint, just a distant chop carried on the wind. But to men clawing through dust and smoke on the valley floor, it was a promise. Marines looked up instinctively, their faces streaked with grime and sweat, searching for the silhouette of salvation. Kelly Kane heard it too. Through the roar of rifles and grenades, the rhythmic beat of rotors swelled, building with each passing second. Her jaw tightened. Helicopters meant extraction, but they also meant the enemy's last chance to crush the survivors before escape. Every hostile weapon would turn skyward now. Through her scope, she caught the first streak of light, a shoulder-fired missile cutting upward from the eastern ridge. It angled toward the lead Black Hawk just as the helicopter swung into view, rotors flashing silver under the sun. Kelly's body reacted before thought. She tracked the shooter, a fighter kneeling against stone, launcher still hot from firing. She exhaled, squeezed. The round caught him high in the chest, knocking him backward. His missiles streaked wild, veering off before detonating harmlessly against a far cliff. The Black Hawk roared on, descending into the canyon. Marines popped smoke grenades below, thick green plumes swirling as signals. The downwash of the helicopter's blades whipped the smoke into chaotic spirals, painting the battlefield in shifting clouds. Kelly shifted her rifle, scanning for the next threat. She found it instantly, a machine gun nest on the western ridge, muzzle blazing at the incoming aircraft. The rounds stitched across the air, dangerously close to the cockpit. Kelly steadied, fired. The gunner dropped, but another fighter lunged forward, taking his place. Kelly cycled the bolt, fired again. Another kill, another second earned. The helicopter flared, skids scraping dirt as it touched down. Marines surged toward it, dragging wounded comrades, covering each other with bursts of suppressive fire. Their shouts were lost in the deafening roar, but their movements carried urgency carved by survival. Kelly's scope found a cluster of fighters shifting down narrow paths, intent on closing the distance to the landing zone. She eliminated one, then another, but more kept coming. Her magazine ran dry. She slammed in a fresh one, fingers quick and steady despite the tremor building in her muscles. The second helicopter appeared, banking hard to avoid fire from the ridges. Tracers clawed up at it, a glowing lattice of death. Kelly raked the high ground with precise shots, dismantling firing teams one by one. Still, too many remained. She cursed under her breath, the taste of dust sharp on her tongue. She was only one rifle. And then, out of the smoke, a new presence dropped into the valley. A figure rappelled from the side door of the second helicopter, sliding down a fast rope with practiced ease. Even through distance and distortion, Kelly recognized the movement. Deliberate, calm, familiar. Commander Mark Warren hit the ground beside the Marines and swung his rifle into action. A SEAL team operator followed, their weapons cutting precision arcs through the chaos. Kelly blinked at the sight. Warren wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't supposed to risk himself, yet there he was, planting his boots in the same dirt as the men he'd once sworn he would never abandon again. Through the scope, Kelly covered him, eliminating threats closing from the flanks. Together, though separated by distance and terrain, their fields of fire overlapped seamlessly. Warren and his operator carved a path for the wounded to reach the Black Hawk. Kelly ensured no one crossed it from above. The first helicopter lifted, rotors clawing at the air. Marines clung to its skids, hands gripping desperately as it rose. Kelly followed the trail of fire aimed at its underbelly and cut down each shooter in turn. Her rifle barrel smoked, her cheek stung with burns from hot casings, but she did not slow. Another missile streaked upward. Kelly tracked its arc, found the launcher still balanced on the shoulder of its operator, and fired. The man crumpled, the rocket veering wide to explode harmlessly against a rock face. She chambered another round before his body hit the dirt. The second helicopter settled into the green smoke, rotors shredding the cloud into a frenzy. Marines poured into its open bay, some stumbling, some carried. Warren gestured sharply, waving more forward, his voice lost in the cacophony but his intent unmistakable. Keep moving, keep fighting, keep living. Kelly's scope shifted again. Another wave of fighters surged from hidden trails, desperation driving them now. They fired wildly, rockets and rifles aimed not just at the helicopters, but at the very men dragging themselves aboard. Kelly fired again and again. Her shots were measured, efficient, lethal, yet for every enemy she dropped, another appeared. The valley had become a funnel of bodies, every path feeding toward the last hope of the Marines below. She adjusted her scope, breath ragged, vision tunneling. Her rifle bucked against her shoulder, round after round after round. Spent brass littered the stone around her, hot enough to burn through fabric. Her fingertips ached from the relentless work of the bolt. Still she held, still she killed. Down below, the second helicopter strained under its load, engines screaming as it lifted from the dirt. The downwash flattened the smoke, whipping it into ribbons. Marines clung to straps, weapons raised in exhausted defense. Kelly's scope followed them until the bird rose above the canyon walls, banking hard for escape. Cheers rippled across the valley floor, half joy, half defiance. The survivors who hadn't yet boarded shouted with renewed fury, firing back at their attackers with the ferocity of men who refused to die quietly. Kelly scanned again. The third helicopter approached, blades flashing in the sunlight. She had to buy them more time. Her reticle landed on a sniper perched across the ridge, rifle aimed at the new arrival. The enemy had patience. He hadn't fired yet, waiting for the perfect shot. Kelly inhaled, steadied, exhaled. She fired. The sniper slumped sideways, weapon slipping from his grasp. She rolled, repositioned, fired again, striking another fighter lunging from cover with an RPG. The rocket misfired, detonating at his feet in a violent bloom that swallowed him whole. Kelly paused, chest heaving, then pressed her cheek back to the stock. She couldn't stop. Not yet. Through her scope, she watched as the third helicopter descended, Marines rushing it in disciplined lines. She saw Warren again, standing firm at the edge of the landing zone, firing short bursts to cover the last of the wounded. His movements were sharp, precise, controlled. He was risking everything to hold the line until the final bird departed. Kelly's finger tightened on the trigger as her scope danced from target to target. Every kill bought seconds, every second brought men closer to safety. But then she heard it, the snap of incoming rounds far too close, ricocheting off stone near her head. Dust sprayed across her cheek. Kelly rolled to the side, pulling her rifle with her, and froze. A squad of insurgents was climbing a ridge. 8 fighters, moving with disciplined precision, rifles raised. They had finally found her. Kelly's pulse hammered. She checked her magazine. Only 5 rounds left. 5 bullets for 8 enemies. The helicopters thundered below. Marines scrambled for their lives, and Kelly Kane stared at the advancing squad. Her rifle felt impossibly heavy in her hands, yet perfectly familiar. She settled into a new firing position, exhaled once, and whispered, "Come on then." The fighters scaled the slope with grim determination, boots grinding against loose rock, rifles slung across their chests. From above, Kelly Kane saw their outlines emerge against the sky, dark shapes advancing step by deliberate step. Her breath slowed. She checked her magazine. 5 cartridges, 5 opportunities against 8 trained killers. The decision carved itself instantly. She couldn't waste bullets on anything but certainty. Her scope aligned with the lead climber. He paused briefly, adjusting his weapon strap. Kelly's crosshairs settled just above his brow. She squeezed. The shot cracked across the canyon, and the man toppled backward, tumbling down the incline, his body colliding with another below. 4 left in the magazine, 7 still coming. The squad didn't falter. Instead, they accelerated, spreading across the rock face, each man finding a separate approach. Their leader barked clipped commands in a language Kelly recognized only by cadence, not words. Professional, rehearsed. Kelly rolled sideways, repositioning to a shallow cut in the ridge. Her rifle barked again, and another enemy spun sideways, his weapon clattering down the rocks. 3 left. The others fired back now, bursts of automatic rounds chewing into the stone around her. Fragments stung her cheek. Kelly flattened herself, shifting again, refusing to stay predictable. She caught a glimpse of one fighter crouching low, advancing behind a boulder. Her third shot struck him in the thigh, dropping him screaming. He writhed, still alive, still dangerous if his comrades reached him. 2 left. Kelly inhaled sharply. Her world narrowed to the sound of her own breath, the hot metal of the rifle, the echoing grind of boots climbing closer. She angled right, spotting another man rising over the ridge lip. His muzzle gleamed in the sun as he leveled at her. Kelly fired, clean through the bridge of his nose. He collapsed instantly, sliding back down the slope. 1 round, 4 enemies. Below, the battlefield surged. The 3rd Black Hawk thundered in the smoke. Marines clambering aboard. Warren and his SEAL partner still covering the line. Kelly caught fragments through her scope. Men stumbling with wounds, others dragging them into the aircraft. Warren firing controlled bursts. But her focus snapped back to the ridge. The final 4 closed fast. Now within 50 meters, they moved in coordination, rifles spitting controlled bursts toward her perch. Dust clouds exploded against stone where her head had been seconds earlier. Kelly ducked, chambered her last round, steadied, and waited. A shadow crested the ridge directly ahead. Kelly fired. The bullet struck center mass, hurling the fighter backward, empty. The click of the bolt slamming home on a dead chamber echoed like a death knell. The 3 survivors roared forward. Kelly let the rifle fall, hands diving for her sidearm. The M9 pistol slid free, cool metal against her palm. She raised it just as the first fighter lunged into view. The pistol cracked 3 times, deafening in the confined space. The man jerked backward, chest riddled, arms flailing before he pitched over the edge. 2 remained. Kelly scrambled backward, firing as she moved. Her shots ricocheted against stone, forcing the fighters to cover. They split, 1 circling left, 1 right, seeking to flank her. Kelly's heartbeat thundered in her ears, sweat blinding her eyes. She wiped it with her forearm, pistol trembling only slightly despite the surge of adrenaline. The fighter to the left emerged first, spraying rounds wildly. Kelly rolled, fired twice. 1 bullet punched his shoulder, spinning him. The second caught his jaw, snapping his head sideways in a spray of crimson. He collapsed with a strangled grunt. The last one came fast. Screaming, rifle raised for a final burst. Kelly fired, but the pistol clicked empty. Slide locked back, magazine drained. The insurgent's eyes burned with triumph. Kelly threw herself sideways as he fired. Bullets shredded the rock where she'd crouched. She crashed against stone, breath knocked from her lungs. Desperation clawed at her. She ripped a knife from her vest, spinning just as the fighter leapt forward. They collided hard, tumbling across jagged stone. His rifle clattered away, but his hands locked around her wrist, forcing the knife back toward her chest. Kelly gritted her teeth, muscles screaming as she fought his weight. The man snarled, pressing down with relentless strength. She twisted, slammed her knee upward. He grunted, loosening slightly. Kelly seized the moment, wrenching her arm free, driving the blade upward. The steel buried into his neck. Hot blood sprayed across her face. The fighter's body convulsed, then went slack. Silence smothered the ridge. Kelly staggered to her knees, chest heaving, knife dripping. Her arms shook with exhaustion. She wrenched the blade free, wiped it against her sleeve, and forced herself back to her feet. Below, the last helicopter strained against its load, lifting off under a storm of gunfire. Warren clung to the door, 1 arm raised, signaling the perimeter Marines to break contact. The rotors tore through the smoke, scattering it into ribbons. Kelly retrieved her rifle, slamming a fresh magazine home with trembling hands. She crawled to a new position, covering the retreat. Enemy fighters surged desperately, unleashing a final barrage at the ascending aircraft. Kelly cut them down 1 by 1, her rounds crisp, efficient, merciless. The helicopter climbed clear, banking hard for escape. Cheers erupted from the valley as the last Marine scrambled onto the bird or into scattered vehicles still able to move. The tide had turned. Against every expectation, men were alive who should have been dead. Kelly collapsed against the stone, chest heaving, her rifle barrel smoked, her hands shook, her lips whispered soundless words she didn't fully register. The ridge around her was littered with bodies, hers and theirs. Her earpiece crackled suddenly. "This is Miller. Enemy positions collapsing. Repeat, collapsing. Unknown Overwatch is clearing the ridges." Kelly closed her eyes. Not unknown, not to her. Through the haze of smoke she saw Warren glance upward, scanning the cliffs. Their eyes did not meet, but she knew he understood. He always had. The extraction complete. Helicopters dwindled into distant specks. The battlefield quieted, broken only by the crackle of dying fires and the groans of the wounded. Kelly remained prone, rifle steady, until the last rotor blade vanished. Only then did she allow herself to sag, exhaustion clawing through every muscle. But the silence did not last. A new voice carried across the ridge, guttural, commanding. Kelly jerked her scope toward it, spotting movement among the rocks high on the eastern side. More fighters. No, not just fighters. Organized, disciplined men moving with purpose, and at their center, a figure directing with precise gestures. Her blood turned to ice. It couldn't be. Malenkov was dead. She had killed him herself. But this wasn't Malenkov, this was worse. Nikolai Kovalev, Malenkov's mentor, former GRU, the man whispered of in every sniper's cautionary tale, the shadow who trained generations in the art of unseen killing. Kelly's breath caught. She steadied her rifle, heart hammering, as Kovalev raised binoculars directly toward her ridge. Their eyes never met, but Kelly felt the weight of his gaze nonetheless. Cold, calculated. The game wasn't over. It had only just begun. Kelly pulled back from her scope, pulse thrumming in her ears. She knew what that look meant. Kovalev wasn't retreating, he was marking her, and she had just declared war against a ghost who never missed. Kelly Kane lay sprawled across the rock, her pulse hammering like a drum beaten too fast. The knife, still slick in her grip, trembled with every exhausted breath. Around her, the ridge bore the evidence of what she had endured. Spent casings glittering like brass confetti, bodies scattered on the slope below, the acrid stink of gunpowder woven into the thin mountain air. But the valley was no longer a roaring furnace of chaos. The helicopters had vanished into the horizon, carrying with them the wounded, the dying, the fortunate. What remained was silence, heavy, unnatural silence, the kind that warns a predator hasn't left at all. Kelly slid her knife back into its sheath and reloaded the rifle with hands that trembled more from adrenaline than weakness. Her cheek pressed against the hot metal of the stock, her eyes searching the battlefield below. The insurgents had broken, scattered by the extraction. Yet on the eastern ridge, disciplined figures still moved with an authority that set them apart. Their formation was precise, their movements crisp, and in their center stood Nikolai Kovalev. He didn't rush, he didn't need to. He stood tall, binoculars raised, scanning with the unhurried calm of a man who owned the ground he walked upon. His desert camouflage blended with the rock, but Kelly could see him clearly enough. He carried no rifle in his hands, only the weight of command. Kelly's finger hovered near the trigger. The temptation gnawed at her. Take the shot now, end it before he vanished again into shadow. But distance, wind and fatigue argued otherwise. A shot like that demanded perfection, and perfection was slipping beyond her reach with every burning muscle. Instead, she studied him through the reticle. Kovalev lowered the binoculars, lifted one arm, and gestured. His men fanned outward in pairs, each taking calculated positions along the ridgeline, a net tightening. Not against the valley anymore, against her. Kelly's throat went dry. She pulled back from the scope, rolling onto her side, body pressed flat against the rock. She had hunted snipers before, outweighted them, outthought them, but Kovalev was different. He wasn't just another rival shooter. He was the architect of the very doctrine she had trained under, the man her former instructor Malenkov had once described in hushed tones as the ghost who sees through glass. She forced herself to breathe, in, out, slow. Her father's words returned, unbidden, carved into memory. Never rush the shot. Physics doesn't care about panic. Kelly slid backward from her nest, abandoning the telltale hollow where she had fired so many rounds. She moved laterally across the ridge, keeping low, keeping silent. If Kovalev's men fixed her position, they would box her in, and she would never see another sunrise. She crawled into a narrow crack between two boulders, stones scraping her elbows raw. From here, she risked another glance through her scope. Nothing obvious, no movement, no shapes out of place. Which was worse. Silence in Kovalev's hands was a weapon sharper than bullets. A whisper of wind shifted. Kelly froze. Through her lens she spotted it, a faint shimmer where heat bent light unnaturally, not a mirage, a scope glint, barely perceptible, hidden in the shadow of a rock outcrop. She adjusted 3 clicks left, exhaled and fired. The rifle snapped, the round streaking across the canyon. A figure jerked, slumping sideways, his rifle tumbling down the slope. One of Kovalev's hunters, neutralized. The victory felt hollow. If she had seen him, Kovalev had wanted her to. The answering shot came less than 3 seconds later. It smashed into the stone a foot from her head, shards slicing her cheek. She rolled instinctively, heart slamming into her ribs. That shot hadn't been random. It had been surgical, measured, a hair's breadth from ending her. Kovalev was on the glass. Kelly crawled deeper into the rocks, gritting her teeth as pain lanced through her side. Her body screamed for rest, but rest meant death. She dragged herself higher, forcing her way into a shallow depression just below the ridgeline. She pressed her scope forward again, scanning. The canyon stretched below, scarred by fire and blood, yet strangely quiet. Her Marines were gone. She was alone. Alone except for him. Her reticle drifted across empty stone until there, a flicker, a shift of shadow. She squeezed. The shot echoed, but her target ducked, a blur retreating behind cover. She had missed. The reply came instantly. Another round cracked into the boulder at her side, sending fragments biting into her shoulder. She hissed but forced herself still. He wasn't trying to kill her yet. He was teaching, showing her exactly who controlled this duel. Kelly wiped blood from her cheek with the back of her glove. Her breathing steadied again. If he wanted to teach, she would learn. And then she would kill him. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The sun dipped lower, shadows lengthening across the ridges. Kelly shifted positions twice, moving silently, never staying long enough to let him fix her. She spotted another of his men creeping across a ledge and dropped him with a single shot. 2 down, but still too many. Her earpiece crackled suddenly, startling her. A voice she hadn't expected. Warren. Kane. Report. Kelly hesitated, then whispered, still on the ridge. Enemy sniper element engaged. Multiple hostiles. Kovalev himself present. A pause. Then, hold position. Reinforcements en route. Kelly almost laughed. Reinforcements wouldn't matter if Kovalev put a bullet through her skull first, but the contact steadied her. She wasn't forgotten. Her scope swept across the eastern wall again. Then she saw him. Kovalev, finally visible, kneeling with his rifle balanced across a stone rest. His form was perfect, spine straight, elbows braced, cheek resting against the stock like an old friend. He had the patience of a statue, waiting for her to move, waiting for her to breathe too loud. Kelly's hands tightened on her rifle. The duel had crystallized into its purest form, predator against predator, knowledge against instinct, teacher against the pupil he never meant to have. She adjusted her scope, compensating for distance, for wind curling through the canyon, for the shimmer of heat rising off the rocks. Her reticle hovered just over his chest. She drew in a breath, held it, and rolled sideways just as a bullet sliced the space she had occupied. Kovalev had fired first, anticipating her rhythm. The rock shattered behind her, stone dust filling her lungs. Kelly coughed, firing blind as she scrambled for a new angle. Her round sparked against his cover, useless. Her heart pounded. He was reading her every move, every calculation. He was inside her mind, dissecting her technique. She forced herself into stillness again, pressed against cold stone. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. He's not invincible, she told herself. He bleeds like anyone else. But the truth pressed heavier. She wasn't just fighting for her life. She was fighting to prove that ghosts could be killed. Another shot cracked, this one closer, skimming the rock near her thigh. Kelly bit back a curse, crawling into a new crevice, rifle tight against her chest. The game stretched on, each exchange whittling her nerves thinner. And then faintly she heard it again, the distant chop of rotors, reinforcements. Her comms crackled once more. "Kane, hold on, we're coming!" Kelly allowed herself the briefest smile. She might not have to die on this ridge today, but Kovalev wouldn't let her leave easily. Through her scope she scanned again, and froze. Kovalev wasn't aiming at her anymore. He was aiming at the helicopters. Kelly's blood ran cold. She had seconds to act. Kelly Kane's eye locked on the reticle, her pulse thundering in her ears. Kovalev's rifle was no longer aimed at her. It was aligned perfectly with the approaching helicopters. The angle, the steadiness of his posture, it was the picture of inevitability. If he fired, one of those birds would come apart in a blossom of flame, its crew and passengers erased in an instant. Kelly swallowed hard. She had one chance to disrupt him. Her cheek pressed against the stock, but her hands shook. Not from fear, she had bled that out long ago, but from exhaustion. Every muscle screamed, every nerve frayed. The weight of the rifle seemed doubled now, her arms trembling as she tried to hold her crosshairs steady on him. Kovalev remained motionless. He was a statue, a relic of pure discipline honed through decades of war. Kelly felt the pull of his gravity, the oppressive certainty that she was aiming not at a man but at inevitability. She inhaled deeply, steadying her lungs. Physics doesn't care about panic. Her father's words steadied her. The helicopters were closer now, rotors chopping the air into thunder. Green smoke drifted across the valley floor, kicked into violent spirals. Marines below pointed, cheering, waving signals for the incoming aircraft. They had no idea death waited in the ridges. Kelly exhaled, eyes narrowing. The distance was brutal, the wind complicated, mirage bent light in cruel ripples, and her body was failing. But the alternative was unthinkable. She fired, the recoil jolted her shoulder, the round cut across the gorge. But as soon as it left the barrel, she knew, off by inches. The bullet sparked against stone beside Kovalev, harmless. He didn't even flinch. He simply shifted, as if he had expected her attempt. His cheek welded to the stock. His barrel dipped fractionally, fine adjustments only a master dared to make. Kelly chambered another round, her breathing ragged now, desperation clawing at her throat. She fired again, missed again. The helicopters loomed into range. Kovalev's finger curled against his trigger. Kelly knew she had only one breath left between life and death. She forced her lungs still. She slowed her pulse, forcing control where her body threatened rebellion. The reticle steadied just for a heartbeat, just long enough. She fired. The bullet flew, a long arc across impossible distance, defying wind and heat distortion. Through her scope she saw Kovalev jerk, not fall, not collapse, but flinch, the round carved across his shoulder, spinning him off balance. His shot went wild, the bullet tearing into empty sky far from the helicopters. The valley erupted in cheers as the aircraft dipped into landing zones, rotors whipping the smoke into a maelstrom. Marines surged toward them, dragging wounded, hauling ammo, covering each other with bursts of fire. Kelly sagged against her rifle. She had done it. She had broken the inevitable. But Kovalev was not dead. Through her scope she saw him recover, one hand clamped to his bleeding shoulder. His expression, what little she could see, remained cold, composed, furious only in the quiet precision of his movements. He raised his other hand, signaling his men. A fresh squad began moving toward her ridge. Kelly cursed under her breath. She had nothing left. Her body drained, her magazines nearly empty. She had fought too long, too hard, and now the most dangerous hunter alive was sending his wolves to finish the job. She crawled backward from her position, dragging her rifle with her. Every movement burned, her vision blurred, but she forced herself up, forced her legs to carry her deeper into the rocks. The ridge became a labyrinth of stone and shadow, every corner a potential death trap. Automatic fire cracked above her. She ducked instinctively as bullets shredded the air. Dust and chips of rock stung her skin. Voices shouted commands in Russian-accented tones, echoing closer. Kelly darted into a narrow crevice, pressing her back against stone slick with sweat. She loaded her last magazine, the metallic click sounding too loud in the suffocating quiet. 10 rounds, 10 lives if she placed them perfectly. Her earpiece buzzed. Warren's voice cut through static. Kane, extraction window closing. Location? Kelly whispered, breathless, still on the northern ridge. Kovalev is here. He's hunting me. Silence, then. Hold. We're coming. Kelly shook her head, though he couldn't see it. She didn't need rescue. She needed to finish this. The squad reached the base of her ridge. She heard them climbing, boots scraping, metal rattling. Kelly raised her rifle, aimed low, and fired. One fell tumbling backward with a scream that echoed down the slope. The others roared, their fire raking across her position. She rolled sideways, narrowly avoiding rounds that shattered her cover into fragments. Her rifle barked again, then again. Each shot measured, each enemy dropping before they could crest the ridge. But they kept coming, relentless, disciplined. Her magazine emptied. She switched to her pistol, body pressed low against the stone. The slide cracked back with each desperate shot, each round snapping into the narrow approaches. 2 more fell, bodies tumbling onto the rocks, then silence. Kelly's pistol clicked empty. She sucked in a breath, scanning. Her arms shook violently now, her body on the edge of collapse. She reached for her knife, the last line of defense she had left. A shadow fell across her. She spun, blade flashing, only to freeze. It wasn't an enemy, it was Warren. He crouched beside her, rifle raised, eyes sharp. Behind him, another SEAL dropped into cover, firing suppressive bursts down the slope. The valley roared back into chaos as Kovalev's men exchanged fire with the newcomers. "On your feet, Sergeant!" Warren barked. Kelly staggered upright, knife still trembling in her grip. She wanted to argue, to insist she wasn't leaving, but Warren's gaze brooked no debate. He pressed a fresh magazine into her hands, nodding toward her rifle. "You've done enough for one day. Time to live." Kelly reloaded, chambering around with a sharp click. She looked once more through her scope, scanning the opposite ridge. Kovalev was gone. Not dead, not captured, simply vanished, as if the mountain itself had swallowed him. Kelly's stomach twisted. She had wounded him, but that was all. He would recover, and he would remember. Warren gripped her shoulder. "We move now. Extraction is waiting." Kelly nodded, though her eyes lingered on the empty ridge where Kovalev had stood. The duel wasn't finished. It had only been postponed. As she followed Warren down the slope, every muscle screaming, every nerve raw, Kelly knew one thing with certainty: Kovalev had marked her just as she had marked him. Their ghosts were now entwined, destined to meet again, and when they did, only one would leave the battlefield. The helicopter's interior rattled like a tin can caught in a storm. Kelly Kane sat slumped against the bulkhead, her rifle across her lap, the smell of cordite and blood clinging to her gear. Gauze wrapped hastily around her arms, soaked through with crimson, the sting of shrapnel still gnawing beneath her skin. Every vibration of the rotors pressed deeper into her bones. Across from her, Commander Mark Warren monitored her with sharp, calculating eyes. His face betrayed nothing, but Kelly knew what was going through his mind. She had disobeyed a direct order, abandoned her station, and operated outside every rule of engagement. Yet without her, 360 Marines would be lying in body bags. The SEAL beside him leaned out the door, weapon braced, as the helicopter banked low. The valley fell behind them, a smear of smoke and wreckage fading into distance. Kelly exhaled, but relief never came. Survival was temporary, judgment was inevitable. They landed at Forward Operating Base Thunder, a smaller installation tucked into the folds of mountains, hidden from satellite eyes and official maps. Its razor wire glinted under the harsh sun, and its walls hummed with the kind of secrecy that weighed heavier than stone. Warren gestured for Kelly to follow. She stumbled down the ramp, boots striking the gravel, body aching with exhaustion. Two operators in unmarked gear flanked her instantly, guiding her toward a squat building at the heart of the compound. Inside, the air was cool, almost sterile. A conference room waited, bare walls, a single table, a digital recorder blinking on its surface. Kelly lowered herself into the chair, her rifle taken from her without ceremony. The click of the recorder filled the silence. "State your name and rank," Warren said formally. "Staff Sergeant Kelly Kane," she replied, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "This is a preliminary debrief of actions during Operation Karangal Sweep," Warren continued. "Explain why you left Firebase Rockford without authorization." Kelly's gaze didn't waver, because Marines were dying, and because no one else would stop it. A muscle twitched in Warren's jaw. He studied her for a long moment before switching off the recorder. The sudden quiet was heavier than any interrogation. "Off the record now," he said, leaning forward. "You recognize the sniper you engaged?" Kelly's throat tightened. "Nikolai Kovalev, former GRU. He's alive, and he's still out there." Warren nodded grimly. "We've been tracking him for years. If you wounded him, you disrupted more than just one ambush. You may have shifted the balance of an entire region." Kelly looked down at her bandaged arm. "Then why do I feel like I just signed my own death sentence?" The door creaked open. A familiar figure entered, Luther Cole, his limp more pronounced after the chaos of the last 24 hours. He eased into a chair across from her, dropping a file on the table. The folder bore no markings, no insignia, just weight. "You know what this is?" he asked. Kelly shook her head. Cole flipped it open. Inside were photographs. Targets with names redacted, maps of hostile regions, satellite images annotated with firing lanes, but one page drew her eyes more than any other, a list of operators. At the bottom, a code name, Iron Claw 7. "This isn't an investigation," Cole said. "It's a recruitment." Kelly's stomach clenched. "I didn't volunteer." No one ever does, Warren answered. But the truth is, you've already proven yourself. You broke rules to save lives. You matched Kovalev in open combat and survived. That combination doesn't belong in a support role. It belongs in the shadows. Kelly leaned back, exhaustion tugging at her bones. You want me to become a ghost, disposable, unacknowledged? Cole's eyes softened. Not disposable, essential. The kind of operator who makes sure others come home. Kelly's chest tightened. The weight of the choice pressed harder than the ridge, harder than the ambush, harder than Kovalev's rifle ever had. She had disobeyed once because it was necessary. To do it again and again by design was another matter. What about Harrison? She asked. He'll demand a court-martial. Warren smirked faintly. Officially, you weren't even on that ridge. Orders have already been backdated. By tomorrow, the record will show you acted under directive from higher command. Harrison can fume all he wants. He doesn't have clearance to challenge it. Kelly clenched her jaw. The rewriting of reality unsettled her more than the enemy's bullets. Lives saved, yet truth buried. Victory purchased with lies. The door opened again. Colonel Harrison himself entered, his posture rigid, his eyes cold. He looked from Kelly to Warren, then to Cole. Sergeant Kane, he said, voice clipped. You disobeyed orders, you undermined command, but you also saved 360 Marines. His expression hardened. You will not face trial. Instead, you are reassigned, effective immediately. Kelly blinked, stunned. Special Operations Command, Harrison continued. Advanced deployment. You'll no longer report to me. Consider it an honorable exile. He turned to leave but paused at the door. His voice softened, just slightly. Don't think I approve, but I respect results. Then he was gone. The silence that followed was suffocating. Kelly's pulse roared in her ears. Cole leaned forward. This isn't exile, it's opportunity. Ironclad Division doesn't play by the same rules. We go where others can't, strike where others won't. But once you step into that world, you don't come back. Kelly stared at the photographs on the table, shadows of men who orchestrated massacres, who funded terror, who pulled strings while soldiers bled. Her hand hovered over the folder, then withdrew. I need time, she whispered. You have 48 hours, Warren said. After that, the offer disappears, and without it, so does your career. They left her alone in the room. Kelly leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Exhaustion pressed down, but sleep didn't come. Images flickered behind her eyes, Marines screaming in the valley, Malenkov's face as he fell, Kovalev's cold precision, the knife sinking into the last fighter's throat. Her father's voice echoed. The shot you don't take haunts you longer than the ones you do. Kelly pressed her palms against her eyes, forcing the ghosts back. She had taken every shot, and still the haunting remained. The desert night pressed heavy against the compound walls, the air thick with silence that carried no comfort. Kelly Kane stood alone on the firing range, her rifle laid across the table before her. Floodlights burned overhead, casting long shadows across the targets lined at 500 meters. She had spent the last 2 days in limbo. Doctors had patched her wounds, command had buried her disobedience beneath classified reports, and officers had circled her like vultures, debating whether to devour or protect her. Now only one choice remained. Her fingers brushed over the familiar weight of the M485. The rifle was scratched, battered, its barrel scorched from hours of relentless fire. It mirrored her own reflection, scarred, exhausted, yet unbroken. Behind her, the crunch of boots on gravel signaled company. Warren's voice carried across the range. You've had your 48 hours. Decision time. Kelly didn't turn. She pulled the bolt back, slid around into the chamber, and raised the rifle. The stock pressed against her shoulder, the scope framing the distant silhouettes. She exhaled, fired. The first target dropped clean. "I should be facing a tribunal," Kelly muttered. "Instead, you're offering me a promotion to Ghost." "That's not how I'd phrase it," Warren said. She chambered another round, fired again. The second target collapsed. "And how would you phrase it?" Warren stepped closer, his presence heavy but not intrusive. "You're being offered the chance to matter where rules don't reach. Iron Claw isn't exile, Kane. It's the tip of the spear. You already proved you're willing to take the fall if it saves lives. This gives you the means to do it again, on purpose, with support." Kelly's third shot cracked, another target falling. She lowered the rifle, breath steady. "And Kovalev?" Warren's silence said enough. Kelly turned at last, meeting his eyes. "He's still out there. He won't stop. He marked me." "And you marked him," Warren replied, "which means he's not hunting nameless Marines anymore. He's hunting you, and if you want to beat him, you can't do it as just another staff sergeant hidden behind protocols. You'll need Iron Claw." Kelly's jaw tightened. Her pulse hammered, but her voice came calm. "You're asking me to trade one war for another. No recognition, no medals, just shadows." Warren shrugged. "Recognition won't save the next convoy. Medals won't stop Kovalev's trigger finger. What matters is the shot that counts." Kelly stared at the rifle in her hands, her father's coin resting beside it. The weight of both was unbearable and liberating all at once. The door to the range opened again. Luther Cole limped forward, his cane tapping softly against the concrete. His eyes carried quiet pride. "You already made your choice on that ridge. All this—" He gestured to the compound, the waiting folder, the debate over her future. "This is just catching up to it." Kelly's throat tightened. She remembered Cole's words before she'd left Rockford, the coin he had pressed into her palm. Her father's ghost lived in that gesture, and now so did hers. She slid the rifle's bolt forward with a sharp click. "Then I'm in." Warren's nod was curt, but his eyes betrayed the flicker of satisfaction. "Welcome to Iron Claw -7. The next morning came with no ceremony. Kelly was escorted to a hangar at the far edge of the base, its interior humming with quiet urgency. Crates of unmarked equipment lined the walls. Operators in nondescript uniforms moved with efficiency, faces half hidden, voices clipped. No insignia, no flags, only purpose. A plain black case waited for her. Inside, a rifle unlike any she had carried before, sleeker, suppressed, designed for silence rather than spectacle. A single line of text etched on the inside lid read, "For those who no longer exist." Kelly lifted the weapon, its balance perfect in her grip. The scope offered clarity sharp enough to cut glass. This was not a Marine's rifle. This was an assassin's instrument, sanctioned by a country that would never admit her name. Cole approached, placing a hand on her shoulder. "This is where you live now, between the truth and the lie, between history and the grave." Kelly met his gaze. "And Kovalev?" Cole's eyes hardened. "He's already moved. Intelligence suggests he's regrouping. He'll strike again soon. And when he does, you'll be there." Kelly nodded. The inevitability of it pressed heavy on her chest. Their duel hadn't ended on that ridge. It had only sharpened. That night she lay awake in a barracks devoid of insignia, her cot one of many. Sleep refused her. She replayed the moment her bullet had grazed Kovalev, the flinch that had spared the helicopter. She should have killed him. The thought gnawed at her until her chest ached. Her father's voice whispered again in memory. "The shot you don't take haunts you longer than the ones you do." But she had taken it, and still the haunting remained. Kelly sat up, gripping the coin tight in her fist. She whispered into the dark, "I'll finish it." 2 weeks later, far from any official battlefield, Kelly crouched in the ruins of a half-collapsed building. Through her scope, she watched a convoy of black vehicles snake along a dirt road miles below. The assignment had been delivered without flourish: intercept, eliminate, disappear. No names, no unit patches, only coordinates. The headset crackled softly. Warren's voice came calm, practiced. "Ironclaw 7, you are green to fire." Kelly steadied her breathing. The reticle found its mark. She squeezed. The first vehicle exploded in fire. The convoy scattered, men shouting, weapons raised. But Kelly was already gone, moving through shadows, the ghost she had been molded to become. Somewhere in another corner of the world, Nikolai Kovalev sat in silence, his arm still bandaged from the wound she had given him. A thin smile tugged at his lips as he studied reconnaissance photos spread across a table. One showed the aftermath of a convoy ambush. Another showed grainy satellite imagery of a single figure vanishing into the hills. Kovalev tapped the image once, gently. "The girl," he murmured in Russian. "She learns." His eyes narrowed. "But so do I." Back at base, Kelly cleaned her rifle beneath the dim light of a single bulb. Her hands moved with mechanical care, but her mind wandered. Every mission would blur into shadows, every success written out of history. She would exist only in whispers. But when she closed her eyes, she saw Marines dragging each other to safety, helicopters lifting free, men who lived because she had chosen to defy. That was enough. She set the rifle down, coin resting beside it. Her reflection glinted faintly in the steel, a reminder that she wasn't gone, not yet. Her whisper cut through the silence. "I'll take the fall for this, every time, as long as they live." The words hung in the air, heavier than any medal, sharper than any blade. Kelly Kane was no longer a staff sergeant, no longer a name in a roster. She was Ironclaw 7, and ghosts don't retire. The battlefield fades, but the echoes remain. Kelly Kane was never meant to stand on that ridge. She was never meant to defy a colonel's order, never meant to shoulder the survival of 360 Marines. And yet, when the valley became a coffin and every second bled into the next, she climbed. She climbed because no one else would. Her shots carved life from certain death. Her defiance rewrote the fate of an entire unit. But victory came at a cost. In choosing to save her brothers in arms, Kelly severed her place in the ranks. Official records buried her actions under layers of secrecy, while whispers carried her name into the halls where shadows rule. Now she carries a new title, Ironclaw 7. No medals, no recognition, only missions that never exist, and enemies whose names are erased with silence. She is both hunter and hunted, marked by the bullet she placed into the shoulder of Nikolai Kovalev, the ghost who once trained the world's deadliest snipers and who now waits in the dark for their inevitable reckoning. Kelly knows the duel is unfinished. Every mission, every shot, every sleepless night leads her closer to that inevitable confrontation. She carries her father's coin, worn and scarred, as a reminder that some burdens are inherited and some are chosen. Hers is both. When the world forgets the Valley of Karangal, she will remember. When the Marines who survived tell stories of an angel above them, she will remember the cost of every trigger pull. And when Kovalev returns, as he will, she will remember the promise she whispered to herself under the weight of the rifle. "I'll take the fall for this every time, as long as they live, because Kelly Kane is no longer simply a soldier. She is a shadow written in fire and silence, and shadows don't retire."